Take the idea that you want to embody and assume that you are already it. But how? Hi there, I'm Adila, your favorite manifesting expert, here to help you create your ideal lifestyle. Welcome to This Is Your Story. In Neville Goddard's 1948 lessons, he says, take the idea that you want to embody and assume that you are already it. Lose yourself in feeling this assumption is solidly real. As you give it this sense of reality, you have given it the blessing which belongs to the objective world, and you do not have to aid in its birth any more than you have to aid in the birth of a child or a seed you plant in the ground. Then he further goes on to describe your present environment vanishes. All of the circumstances of life change and make way for the to that coming of that to which you have given your life. As you walk knowing that you are what you wanted to be, you objectify it without the assistance of another. So let me give a few examples of this, maybe like two or three. So he is saying that you take this idea and you embody it, right? You're being it now. Look at it like I always have this reference from the movie Ghost. If you've seen the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, where at the end of the movie, Patrick Swayze jumps into Whoopi Goldberg's body, and I always get that image when I think of embodying. You're kind of jumping into this other experience of you, essentially. But you can also look at it like you're putting on a hat and then you're operating as this person. So let me put this into perspective. Let's say that I wanted a new job and I was terrified of interviewing and didn't really know the steps to get to that job, but that's the job or the career that I want. Let's say that it's like a teacher. So, what we begin with always is the end. You always begin with the end. You let go of the story where you're so bad at interviews and you don't know how you'll pass, or, feeling like you have to have on the right outfit. You go all the way to you being that teacher now. So you set yourself in an experience where you're that embodied teacher. You're in the classroom, depending on what age you want to teach. I'll take my last job where I was a college professor, right? I was in the classroom. I can see the classroom right now. I can sit in the classroom and I'm at the head. I'm near the whiteboard. And my students come in for class and they sit at their desk, and the the room that I taught in had computers so they can access their whatever information they needed while I was teaching. The way for me to feel like this is real is to imagine the conversations I'm having with my students, to imagine what lesson I'm on, to imagine how what I'm doing today is helping people excel into, whatever goals that they have. And while I'm even talking about it in the moment, I can see my students approaching me, asking me questions, me helping them with whatever they needed, and it's making it feel real. It's making me see myself laughing because they're making jokes or they're saying, thank you for being here. This was so helpful, or whatever I used to experience with my students. I have extracted like all of those good memories because it was a community college. So that wasn't the last stop for a lot of them. They were going on to 4-year universities. So a lot of them would be grateful and thank me for helping them, on to that next step. But do you see how I took this idea of me being a teacher and I just went into the experience? So even if you haven't been a teacher before, you've experienced teachers or you've seen teachers in movies. You can um, you can extract that experience and imagine yourself in that position. You don't focus on how am I going to get through this interview? How am I going to have time to study for the interview or whatnot? Because that just builds like anxiety. You go to the end and you imagine yourself in that position. It doesn't have to be a teacher, it could be any position, but in that position, and you're at your desk, and maybe you've decorated your office, or you've met friends and you guys go to lunch together. So you go into those experiences that are far beyond just the interview or just the beginning stages, and you bask in that experience. And then the other things that need to fill in will. You'll all of a sudden be given information about how to apply. Here's the best practice for the interview. And some of those things will even, be way better than you expected. Like, I started affirming a story about me being the best candidate for the last job that I interviewed for, and I got selected and I was the top candidate. So when you start to kind of take yourself out of, how am I going to do this, and that kind of like anxious chatter, and you go to the end, those experiences will easily fill in for you. So remember what Neville said: take the idea that you want to embody and assume that you are already it. Now let's do this with love. Let's say right now for me, I am manifesting a husband, right? So right now I'm seeing myself in my day to day and I'm single, but I want a husband. So how do I begin with that? You begin with the end. So you start, or I start, whatever, but you start in that end scene, those end experiences with you and your husband. So so right now in this moment, I have a husband, right? I am married now. I may have changed my last name. Um, so my identity is totally different than me being a single person, right? We made vows, we made a commitment, and we're likely living together, right? We share the same room. Like, your whole experience will change, right? So if I am married now, then what is my life like now? Go to the end. You're not beginning with, oh, I need to get out there. I need to start dating. I need to online date, whatever. You're not starting there. You might go through those kinds of steps, but that's not where you begin. You begin in the end. You start by saying, wow, look at the amazing partner that I manifested. They're so great to me. They treat me so well. It's so nice to come home to somebody who's so supportive. We make dinner together. We go out to restaurants so often. We really share a beautiful life together. That's the kind of story that you want to begin with. And what will happen once you start, you write that story down and you start reading it, your imagination will become way more vivid. You'll have more scenes and um, more scenarios. I can't think of a word, but that will keep you in this state of being a married person, and it'll just be added to and added to, and it'd be like, oh, what about this and what about that, and oh, we could do this together and we could do that. The options are just endless. It's not like this, you make this one story, and it, like you're imagining the same scene over and over, which you can. Neville's Some of his students had a lot of success with imagining the same scene over and over, but your stories will become more potent, more vivid, and it'll feel like you're in those experiences now without even having a partner. I mean, so many things could happen. You'll soon see, like for me, I'm not even necessarily manifesting marriage right now, but I help, my clients with manifesting marriage. And my exes will start, popping in the picture. Like, all of a sudden, it's just like so many different people randomly that I haven't seen in years. And it'll just be in different places that I don't even frequent, places that I'll be going down the street and I'm like, why would they even be over here? So you don't have to go seeking for anything. Those You'll start to notice that your mind will want to show you evidence of this story, right? Constantly. And your world will start to shift and you'll start to see yourself as a married person. And then your world will start showing you more available people. Maybe people start talking to you more who may be interested in you. Like the story just kind of opens up and unfolds by itself when you begin in the end. You'll notice that the how is this going to happen? How do I do this? What do I need to change before this happens? That will all go out the window because the story will just come together when you least expect it. And let's take money because, everyone loves money. But I've done this with money. I have sat there and wrote out my story as the wealthy one, right? And it shifted everything in my world. So, um, what we do, or best practice really, with everything is to begin with the end. Who am I as the person who is wealthy now? How do I live my life? How am I experiencing everything day to day? Do I work? Do I work part time? Do I volunteer? Am I just like straight retired and I spend my days going to cafes and parks and exploring the world? Like, what is it? Those are some of the things that I asked myself, like, how will I be spending my time as this wealthy person? For me in particular, I've worked all my life since I was like 13 something. And I decided that I don't want to work a 9 to 5 anymore. So I did this, like, I use Neville's I Remember When story, and I say that all the time, but um, certain things started shifting already. Like in my wealth story, I wrote down that I'm a multimillionaire, and as a result, these are the things that occur, right? So I'm a multimillionaire and I am debt free. That was the first thing. So then I took time and I listed out every single debt that I have: credit cards, car payment. I had credit cards, car payment, taxes, tax debt that I owed. Um, can't think of anything else right now, but I wrote those all down. And oh, student loans. Student loans was the biggest debt that I had. And oh, it's so embarrassing how it got to that. But, anyways, so I wrote down all my debts, even though I didn't believe that all of these debts could vanish, they're vanishing already just from me writing down that story. I wrote that I'm a multimillionaire. And as a result, like all of my bills are paid in the beginning of each year. I don't have to worry about anything. I can pay for whatever I want. I can travel whenever I decide to, and all my debts are paid. And I wrote all my debts down and I put done, 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 done. It Within like 2 months, they started vanishing. I started getting checks that were more than enough to cover my credit cards, pay my credit cards off within 2 months. It was crazy, and it still keeps happening. So to add to that, when I wrote that story about me being a multimillionaire and being debt free, I mean, I made mine long and lengthy, and because so many ideas came to mind, it was so fun. It wasn't like a tedious, drawn out story that I can't stand. Every time I read it, I start laughing, I start, feeling those experiences, and they're so fun. So, but to add to that, I would write it out and then I'd imagine what it would feel like. Like, whoa, That feels so good. I'd imagine making the payments because I've done that before. I've paid off credit cards or whatever, but I'd imagine making those payments and feeling so good just to say, nope, I'm paying the whole thing. And that's exactly what I did. The people, I had like $3,000 on like a Nordstrom card that I owed, and they were like, you want to pay a portion? I was like, nope, the whole thing. I want to pay it off. And they were like, the entire thing? You can just pay like 1,000. And I was like, nope, whole thing. Same with like I had a Capital One card, same thing. It felt like the same conversation happened twice, like with both creditors. But I was like, nope, pay it off, whatever. But I'd imagine those scenes because those are all scenes. Those are all scenes of me being debt free, me paying the credit cards off, me, having the bank deposits with the large amounts of money in them. So those scenes are vivid. You can sit there and you can imagine them. You can see how it feels to be relieved and not have so much debt. And again, take the idea that you want to embody and assume that you already it. That's exactly what we do when we're changing the story. In our stories, we use not all of Neville's techniques, but the ones that I love, the ones that come naturally. Because if you think about it, we have a story about everything. And that's how I came up with the idea of like my whole business in itself. We have a story about everything, and we're operating from that story. I'm operating from a story of being a woman, being a mother, um, like uh, being a social worker. I used to be a teacher, so I would operate from those stories, being a therapist. Um, but And if you create your ideal story, that is what you will start operating from. It works like magic. So take your time, create the best stories that you can about everything that you want to, and remain faithful, as Neville says to them. Remain faithful to that story. You create that story. Let's say you sit down, you create that story, you write it out, you're smiling about it, whatever, and then you come back to it midday because the stuff that is not um does not match this story that you just wrote will start coming back in your mind on autopilot. So you take another point in time during the day and you come back and you reread that story. You sit with that story and you just enjoy it. You bask in it. And then at night, which is one of the best times to do it, you reread that story. You can add to it. You could talk about what a spectacular day that you had, but you read that story right before bed because then you're in a relaxed state. The world is shutting off, and that story will become more prevalent. The same with the morning. It's a very potent time to read and be in these stories because you're mostly in your imagination before you grab your phone or start your day and turn the whole world on. If you'd like help with creating your ideal story, check out the links in my bio. I'm here to help, and I will talk to you soon. If you like content like this, let me know by liking, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.